Today we're going to look at how to edit and work with scalable vector graphics using the Boxy app online. As stated in the course, if you want to use any other vector graphics editor like Illustrator or Affinity Designer, that's fine. We're using this tool because it's easy to access and free, but it's not quite as powerful as others, but it will still do just fine for this course. I myself really prefer Affinity Designer over Illustrator for a number of reasons. One is you buy a persistent license that's relatively cheap, but I think for here, working with Boxy is just fine. So if you go to the boxy.svg.com, then you can just say, click Launch App. This will load the editor. It may ask you for permissions to access your local storage, which you can grant or not. Granting that will mean that any sort of temporary data is stored locally on your machine and it will speed things up. But you might be okay with a sort of simple editing that we're doing without using local storage. The other thing I'll mention right off the top is that you don't need to register to use this program. But if you want to save your work, you do need to register. And so for me, I'm not going to register because I'm just showing you how to use this. You can decide how much faith you have in this not closing or quitting on you, and you might want to save it along the way. And that's totally up to you. So I'm going to let it use cookies. That's fine. What we're going to do today is learn the basics of the tools while drawing a penguin. The reason to draw this penguin is there's sort of a tutorial I really like on using Illustrator that draws a penguin, so we're just going to borrow from that. All right, what we need first is to draw the penguin body. So we're going to take a rectangle and draw this out. This seems like a fine size for this penguin body. Then we need to have a penguin head, and so I can click on the ellipse and we'll make this a circle. So if I have the ellipse and I just click and drag, I'll get any old shape. But if I hold down Shift and move, I'll always get a circle. So I could draw this. And then if I want to be able to move this around, I can press Escape. That brings me back to this transform tool, which I can use to click and drag around. Now these are kind of not the right size. And so one thing I could try to do is basically place this on the left and then click and hold Shift to resize this and try to line it up so it's exactly the same, but you still may not get it exactly the same size. So instead of that, I'm going to select this circle, go over to geometry, open this up, and now you see I have sort of control over the size. So rather than having to guess, let's just say I want this to be 40 pixels wide, and then the radius, we'll keep it a circle, so 40 pixels tall. Another way I could do that instead of typing them both is to click this lock, and that will lock the ratio. So now if I change one, it changes the other. So we'll go back to 40 pixels. Then I can select this and I'll just do the same thing. I'll say I want the width to be 80. So before, if I click on this circle, you can see that it was a radius of X 40, so the twice that is the diameter of 80. There's the width here as well. And so I'm going to make those equal. Then I would like them to be aligned. And so I'm going to click on both of these and say align. And so in the upper toolbar up here, I have click center horizontal. And now they're perfectly aligned horizontally. They're not totally aligned how I want vertically, and you can kind of see it here. If I hold down Control and use my mouse wheel, I can zoom in. So one thing I could do is try to drag it up, but it's going to be hard to align it exactly how I want. That actually looks kind of okay, but you might end up with it slightly offset. I can hold Control Z and go back to where it was. The other option is to hold Shift while you're moving, and then if I move up, it won't let me move side to side if I start moving up. And so this is a way to get things aligned like thus. All right, so now I have a penguin head on top of a penguin body. but I can see them separately. Penguins maybe have black feathers with white spots, so this is going to be the main body. So let's just have it be black. If I wanted to change the fill, I can go to fill, and then I can select any color I want in here, and you can see it's changing the fill around. And so let's just have this be totally black. Let's go to the rectangle and we'll do the same thing. All right. Now I have this head and body together. What we want to do is create the sort of white elements that we expect to see for the penguin. And so let's draw another rectangle for that. Put it right here. That looks about right. I really want this rectangle sort of in the bottom right corner. So let's hit escape. That gets us back to transform. Let's select both of these objects. And then we'll use align, but we'll align on the right. That'll shift things over, and then align on the bottom. That'll shift things over again. All right. Now this I wanted to be white, so I'll say escape. I'll select just this part here, and then we'll go straight up pure white. I have this outline around here, and that's because not only do I have a fill, but I have a stroke on the outside of this shape. So if I go to stroke, I could also then change it to white, and that'll give me something that's completely white if that's what I want. The other option, of course, would be to make it transparent so that I don't have anything for the stroke. Those give us slightly two different looks. I think both are fine with me. All right, so we have sort of a blocky penguin body here. It would have maybe an eye that we need to add. So let's add another circle up here somewhere that's going to be sort of for its base. We'll make that a white stroke and a white fill as well. We need to have an eye, and the way we're going to add an eye is to draw an arc. And the way we're going to draw an arc is to use the spline tool. So if I click spline, and I'll zoom in here a little bit, how splines work is that if I click and then click and then click individually, I can get something like this. All right, it looks like the sort of triangular eye. When I'm done, I can press escape. And if we want to have this angled eye, we're done. Looks pretty good to me. We'll probably go draw curved ones eventually. Let's go back to the transform tool. I don't need this eye to be filled with anything that is gray. So let's go ahead and just change it. All right. Now we have an eye. I can also maybe center it a little bit more. We also have, if I wanted it exactly centered, I could select both of these and use center. Now it's right in the middle. So using these alignment tools is going to be very useful for us. All right, what else might we want? We want our penguin to maybe have a nose. The nose would look like a triangle, so we'll go down to other shapes. If I click on this, I will get a triangle. So when I draw this triangle, you'll have control over whether it's a right triangle or not by dragging this slider back and forth. So if we didn't want a right triangle, just a nose like this, we could have it, and then I can make it rounded or not rounded as I like. So let's make it kind of a little rounded. That seems cute to me. Here would be his nose. Now his nose is not oriented correctly. So let's select this. And again, I can click and drag things around. But while I have an object selected, if I click again, then you'll notice once I do that, that the colors on the edges are going to change from blue to orange and red. The red is what lets us drag and rotate an arbitrary amount. So if we just wanted it 90 degrees, that's something that we could change back here. In geometry, I can say, no, I want my rotation to be like minus 90, or I want it to be 90, and I get it oriented flat out. That's totally fine. But if I then put it here and I think like, oh, it might look a little bit more interesting if it was just like slightly downturned, then that's a way to do that. The orange ones, just so you know, let me control skew on this shape. We're not going to be doing that here. So let's go ahead and put that back here. We'll make his nose black. I guess I've decided this is a male penguin, although it doesn't really matter either way. And there we have a penguin like this. Okay. Penguins also have flippers. Flipper probably looks a lot like the nose, so I can say copy paste, and then which I did using Control V and Control C. So Control C is copy, Control V is paste. There's my flipper. Let's make this flipper just a little bit longer than his nose. And there we go. So now I have a penguin with an eye and some flippers. Needs a tail. Well, a tail might look a lot like a nose, except I think I want the tail to look like it is sitting flat on the ground. So we'll change this to 90 degrees. And then when I draw my triangle, you'll see I get a 90-degree triangle. Then I will hit escape to get back to the transform tool. I'll click on it again to get the red, and then I'll turn this. Although I think at this time I really do just want it to be 90 degrees. So we'll go to geometry, rotation, 90 degrees. That is not what I wanted. I wanted minus 90, but let's just use something else. We can also rotate here or flip, so we can flip vertically, flip horizontally. We could have also used this to just quick rotate around. Put that over here. So now our penguin has a tail. I want it flat on the ground. So again, we can do this where I have the transform tool. I've selected his tail. I've selected his body. And then I can say align on the bottom, and I will get it aligned on the bottom. We'll go ahead and make the color filled in black. Now I have a penguin that has a flipper, a tail, a nose. We could even give it a few like ruffled feathers if we wanted. So maybe something like this. I'll hit escape and I'll draw another pair. And then maybe, if I zoom out, those are kind of thin. And so maybe I want them to be a little thicker. So let me select those two by clicking and dragging and go to stroke. And then let's go ahead and change the stroke width a little bit. So I can bring this up. And now we're at a 3-point thick stroke. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Maybe the eye should have been the same. So let's go ahead and click here and say 3. So it's the same. He's sort of like just sitting on nothing. So let's go ahead and give him some brown to sit on. Undo that. Back. Go. I'm not worried about this moving past the white. The white is just showing us where are we going to render something when we finally get around to like saving or exporting. And okay, so we can do this. And then bring this over a little bit. We'll have him sit. How about he's sitting on the edge of some water? So then we'll also do this. And then this will be our water. So for our water, let's have no stroke at all. And I guess water probably should be blue. So we'll move through the hues here till we get something like, oops. Have been doing that in fill. So, yeah, that seems okay. Now we have some water. We could add little details if we wanted. So how about we have a circle that's going to be some like little bubbles that come up from underneath, and escape to transform, drag, select all of these, and we'll give all of these white fill. And do we need a stroke or not? I don't know. It doesn't really bother me. So we could do the same trick we had before, make everything transparent, or we could go in here and say the stroke is 0. That's another way to do that. Now we got some bubbles. I guess I promised that I was going to teach you how to make curved lines. So let's give this guy a little plant over here. If I have a spline, I can click. And then if I click again and again, I would just get like straight lines. So let's say we don't want straight lines. Let's go go back. If I click, and the next time I click and drag, I'll get a bend like that. And then I can click and drag and get a bend like that. One more. Here, like this. All right, and then I could escape, select all of these, say I don't want any fill, transparent, and then I would like to make these aligned a little bit better, so let's click on that, and then I can actually like nudge them around by clicking on them and pressing the arrow key to go back and forth. So there's that. This one I think might actually look better if it was reversed, so let's just do that. And now he's got a little plant right sitting behind him. The spline tool you could do to start with, that you click and drag, and then there's nothing that prevents you from like doing this more and more. And so this is a way that if you get really familiar with how to design or work with, you can create fancy shapes. And I guess here, look at this, we sort of accidentally ended up with something that almost looks like a foot. So let's fix that up really quick. Here is this shape. This is a little weird looking, so we can click on here and go in. This is now the edit. It lets us edit all these little anchor points we have, and I can drag it around, and I have control over all of these splines. And now I have something that looks a little bit more like a regular old foot. And so let's do, whoop. That's not terrible. We'll leave that. All right. Then we can make my foot smaller. We can click on it again. Let's see, do I want it maybe just a little skewed like that? And then let's rotate it. And we'll bring it over. It's obviously way too large. So let's click on this again to get back to something where I can just resize it, where I have these blue guys, and then I'll put the foot there. I don't know, our penguin feet are maybe orange-ish. So how about something like that? All right, so we have a penguin foot. Last thing I think that is worth thinking about for the penguin foot up here is that, do I want this penguin foot in front of the cliff or behind the cliff? Right now it's in front. If I have an object and it's sitting on top of another object, I have the ability to control how it is ordered with respect to that object using the tool up here. So this says move it lower. It's going to move it behind the object. So I'm just going to keep clicking on that. Now it moves behind. I can keep going. Now it's behind the penguin. I can move it up like this. Yeah, we have a couple options. So how about we put one behind and one in front? I guess penguins kind of have 2 feet, and so we'll do that. I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. Take this one and move it up. Keep that one here. The one in the back maybe is a little darker, and so I can even just come down like this, and now it looks shadowed. Now I have something behind and something in front, and it kind of looks like a penguin. Yeah, this seems all right. Okay, one last thing that I do want to talk about is adding text, because we are going to work with text in this course. So I'm going to click on pan, and I can now move this around like this, and now we're going to add text. So I'm just going to add straight text, and we'll do that in a second. I do want to say that you can have this text path, which many of you might kind of find fun. Like, let's say I wanted a label around this penguin. I can drag something like this, and then if I type in text, it'll just follow this path. Yeah, we're not going to use that though. We're just going to add text. This is Billy the penguin, and you can write anything you want in here. And then also I'll say by trim there. So I do want you to have something that has your name in it so that when I am grading assignments, I can see that. So that's fine. And then if I want to change the behavior of this, I go over to here and say typography. So maybe I don't want Arial. I can use there we go. I can use the fonts that are built in. So how about Advent Pro for that? And I saw one I kind of liked here, just for fun. I'm not sure I've ever seen this font before. Oops. That will be Billy the Penguin's name in that font. So there we go. All right, other things that we can do is let's get this all lined up how let's align it on the eye. I kind of got it aligned on the eye. I can hold shift, drag it down. This doesn't need to be as big as it is, so let's go ahead and reduce the importance of my name. And then we have Billy the Penguin up here, and you see you have this weight. And so I can make it heavier or lighter. I think it's already pretty good as was. Again, I'm going to hold shift and move this up. I'm going to drag this over so that it's like aligned on that eye. Hold shift and drag it down. There we go. So now we have our final image. And again, you could add anything else you want to this if you want. The last thing we want to do is to get back out what we've edited. We're just going to use the download feature here. The download feature, because this is an SVG editor, will give us back an SVG. That's what we want. Something I want you to know is that if I think about the objects that are on here, you can see that this rectangle extends beyond the white canvas, and that on the bottom, this rectangle is below the blue. But both of these are actually below the white canvas. So when I download, it's only going to render the things that are inside the white canvas drawn here. And that means that once I download this and I look at it, I expect that the bottom is going to be completely flat and I won't have this stepped amount difference. So let's go ahead and go File, Download. That'll put it in your download folder. And then I can open this up and it opens up huge for you. That's okay. So we'll just do this, and there it is. That is the downloaded object that we created. And you can see there's nothing underneath. You can't scroll up and down. It is flat, so it's just rendered what was on that canvas. And that's it. So we could go back and add borders and things like that if you want, but I think for now, we know how to make objects, how to align objects, how to order objects, and how to add text and move text around within this simple SVG editor, which is everything you're going to need to know for this particular course. So hopefully it was fun drawing a penguin, and I'll see you in the next video.